Hey, hi, how are you? My name's Salt. Welcome back to some Deadlock. Today we're going to be talking about the urn. Now, a chunk of this video was recorded after the first iteration of the most recent urn update, and the rest of it was recorded after a newer update to it. So this is kind of two videos being crammed together into one, because I did not want to waste all the footage that I have put together for this video. I am mostly doing this to give feedback overall about the urn changes and about how I feel about them. And so as a result of it, I decided to go ahead and make this video anyways. I feel like giving proper and good feedback about attempted changes to the overall game of Deadlock is really useful for the devs, especially considering the fact that this game is, as far as we know, not slated to fully release anytime soon. So I just wanted to make sure that I put out all this information in the best way that I possibly could, given how fast this game updates. It can be often hard to keep up with it, but I do my best. Let's hop right into all of my feelings about the new urn, good and bad. So let's start by talking about the new pickup mechanic, because that's the easiest thing to start looking at. And honestly, the new melee to pickup seems totally fine to me. I kind of conceptually like it. There's a lot of stuff in this game that has slowly changed over the years to go from you stand on it to get it to you melee to get it. And I think that melees being such an interesting and intrinsic part of this game actually works with the urn. I think that needing to melee to pick up soul bags, needing to melee to pick up rejuve, and then now as well needing to pick up urn is fun. I think it's interesting, and with a game that has such a heavily built-in parry system here, it works really well for the game as a whole. Something else that's, I think, pretty cool about the new urn is the way that it goes back to its starting location. With how fast it is and how hard it is to catch up to and grab, and in fact, impossible to grab now, where before you used to be able to stop it on the way. It is a much more interesting idea of you have to commit to the urn when you do it, otherwise it goes all the way back to its spawn point and you are not catching it. I think that's a pretty cool change. I think the number of games where you'd potentially have comeback urns, but someone on the enemy team was smart enough to grab urn and run it back to their spawn, causing you to lose out on usually an urn or two in a row, if they're smart enough about how they grab it, felt pretty bad, and I think this system of it running back to where it spawns faster is good. Urn has new music now, which is completely different from how it used to be, where it just had like a little random jingle. Now it has an entirely new, unique soundtrack that goes along with it, that is playing in the background as I'm running around with it, that gets more intense as you get closer to the turn-in point. And I think that part's really interesting and cool. I think it makes the urn feel like an actual objective now, whereas before it just kind of felt like an added-on thing that was just there to be done. Including this part right here after you turn it in. It's a little too calm for the chaos that usually ensues after you actually drop the urn off in the mid drop-off point, but it is still pretty cool. Another thing that I will mention as enjoying about the urn in its current state is the actual amount of damage that it does to you once you hold it past a certain time. The massive chunks of HP you lose actually feel like kind of a big deal, in the fact that you're losing most of your health bar per second, and on top of all of that, you'll probably have a really hard time dunking it if you're going into the final fight at the urn with very little HP. The fact that it can kill you as well feels really interesting, and I feel like is more of something that is an afterthought of, well, this probably should have always been able to kill you, more so than a new mechanic. We've actually had some major updates to the urn. The major updates effectively coming down to there's now new turn-ins. The amount of time to turn it in has now been lengthened at all levels. And on top of that, there is now more time after someone has heavy meleeed it to make it switch sides to heavy melee it back to make it switch sides again. And all of those changes are wonderful. If you haven't seen those changes, go find the Steam forums for this game and find the patch notes section, where you will be able to see all of said changes. But overall, I think all those changes have been really nice. But I'm still going to be giving my feedback on stuff that I feel like could use some help, and stuff that I feel like could be made a little bit different and better. So something else that changed as part of it that I do actually enjoy is the fact that as you're traveling, you get an extra piece of stamina. I have 2 extra from Stam Mastery, but now I have 5 total, because I am carrying the urn, so I have 1 extra piece of stam. On top of that, you can now actually get sprint speed moving while you're carrying the urn, and you get increased extra sprint speed, and the turn-in is now over here. Now, that does not take away from some of the problems I still have with the current iteration of the urn. So as you can see, after you turn it in, the timer is much, much slower than it used to be. It's now all the way up to 15 seconds if you are not favored. However, one of my largest problems with how the urn currently functions is still here. And that is lack of clarity after turn-in. The only thing that shows us that we have turned in the urn is something up there in the kill feed. If there's a crazy hectic fight going on around the urn, that kill feed will be clogged up and it'll be really hard to tell in the moment who has turned in the urn. Other games that I have played that are MOBAs, such as Smite, if y'all have been long-time heads of the channel, you know how much I've enjoyed that game in the past. That game has a giant pop-up in the middle of the screen saying what player defeated what objective, and they are always color-coded so that the name of the player is the same color as your team, either red or blue in Smite, and in the case of this game, it would be what, blue or orange, I suppose? But either way, the lack of clarity around turn-in is something that still bothers me, and I really hope that they work on as time goes on. Something else that I feel like is missing from the new turn-in for the urn, as you saw when I turned it in a second ago on the video, the urn doesn't spit out souls anymore. I personally always really liked the fact that it spit out souls as part of the turn-in process. I always really liked that the whole concept was, yes, you turned in the objective, but you have to be careful and defend your objective. In other MOBAs, usually objectives like this are a thing that you defeat, and defeating it is what grants you the value from it. This is taking a different route, and going the turn-in is the thing that gives you different value from it. And while I think that is okay, I think that not having any of the souls pop out at all kind of goes against the spirit of Deadlock as a game. This game is a shooter. That is a good portion of this game at its core, and so it feels kind of strange that we took the shooting aspect that came with this objective that I thought was a really cool, neat, unique aspect to it, that you have to still secure your thing, or if you're on the enemy team, you have to try and steal, and we're just ditching it. And it feels kind of sad that a unique aspect of this mechanic is just being completely ditched. Now, we could bring it back, but then the turn-in timers being as long as they are and being such an valuable aspect of the fight kind of go out the window. And in this instance, I'm very glad I am not a game dev for this game, because that's a very difficult decision to make. Do you make it a more interesting fight over where you're able to bounce the urn back and forth, or do you make the fight over be the souls that pop out at the end? I feel like it would be a very difficult decision to do both, so I do not envy the devs on the team right now. One of the big changes that they're testing out at the moment that I actually have been really enjoying is that the pickup point for the urns have changed when you are favored. The same is true on the other side of the map, where if the enemy team was favored, the urn would be spawning either over there or over there, next to the old turn-ins for when you had less farm than the enemy team. Now, when I was playing the game the other night, there was some odd things happening that I'm not sure if they were intentional or unintentional. But at the moment, in testing, when I pick this up, the turn-in is still on the other half of the map, so I would still have to traverse the map with the urn. And the whole plus side of it is that the urn being on your side of the map initially is just to make it easier to pick up, and then from there you can figure out how to fight for the turn-in. When I was playing the other night, in my games, I would have once every 3 urns or so, and it's hard to keep track of because obviously souls fluctuate in a match, and it was not every single time that the enemy team had advantage, where sometimes the urn pickup would lead to a turn-in being on the same side of the map. Now, if that's intentional, I actually really think that that's a good change, because it makes the run to turn in the urn much shorter, and you have to be really on top of the urn as the team that doesn't have the comeback urn. But it could also be a little too easy for that to be the case. I would worry about the comeback urn becoming something that teams actually kind of sandbag for in the early game, where they just like don't grab boxes early, or they just let minions die and lose souls on purpose potentially, to then make sure that they have a really easy urn to pick up afterwards. This is also something that in my previous iteration of this video, before I had to cut most of it because they changed some of the settings, would potentially allow for different turn-in spots based on the comeback urn. This is something that I had suggested before. Whereas right now, I actually do like the new turn-in spots being all the way over in the lane, because it means that you have to move the furthest along the map in order to get a turn-in. However, I've also thought that these bridges right here on the side lanes, potentially beneath these bridges, in between the side lanes, could be a pretty good turn-in spot as well. If they want to fiddle around with the comeback urn mechanic of having different turn-in spots, as well as different pickup spots, they could fiddle around with the idea of potentially putting it on these bridges on either side of the map, so that it is not quite as far over. It also makes it so that the fight is a bit easier to get to because you can use the teleporters on either side of the map to get to these bridges as fast as possible. It also, funny enough, gives a big advantage to characters like Rem and Calico, being able to contest and do things quickly because they'll be able to run through the underground area and pop out right at the urn turn-in spots. I'm really happy that Valve is trying new things with new mechanics in this game. Even as deep into the dev process as they are, I really like the concept of them trying to change stuff up. I wasn't a fan of the first urn, like, at all. If y'all watch any of my streams or any of my stuff when it was active, you know that I was not a big fan of it, and I really didn't like how it turned the entire game into a giant free-for-all in the middle lane. This new urn's definitely a little bit better than that iteration, but I still think they have plenty of ways to go. But as always, make sure that when you give feedback on stuff like this, it's always constructive. I tried my best throughout all this recording and all this video stuff, even having to redo a lot of it. I tried my best to be constructive, because at the end of the day, this is still an early access game, and the devs are still making the game as we play it. I feel like sometimes people forget that, and I feel like sometimes people aren't very kind with how they talk about stuff as a result of that, and I think that we should do better as a gaming community in general and not do that. But thanks for hanging in and watching. Y'all are cool and I appreciate you, and I hope to catch you all in the next one.